Okay, so let's now open up the VS mode. So you have 4 wavetable based oscillators here, and you can change the wavetable by clicking and dragging here. I'll add in one in oscillator B as well. Move the joystick to B to hear it. Oscillator C and oscillator D. Let's go for a sine wave. So that's how you mix the 4 oscillators with the joystick. You have semitone controls for all oscillators here. Fine-tune control as well. Pretty standard stuff. Alright, next is the filter section. Filter cutoff and resonance. You can switch to any of these modes for the filter. There's also a filter envelope, which you can't click on to change, but you can hit the edit button and it opens up in the modulation section here. Here you have this 4-stage envelope that can be shaped in interesting ways. I'll bump up the amount. So as you can see, it's more flexible compared to a standard ADSR envelope. You can even set up loops between the various breakpoints. So let's say I choose 2 and 3. Now that section repeats. You can even limit the number of repeats here. Very cool stuff. Okay, so that was the filter envelope. Next is the amp section, which has standard volume and panning controls. And similar to the filter envelope, the amp envelope too has the 4-stage breakpoints with looping. At the bottom here you have 2 LFOs. Now for assignments, you need to open the modulation tab, and here you can assign the LFOs to modulate a bunch of different parameters. Let's set one up. I'll assign LFO 1 to modulate the filter cutoff. So click here and increase the amount. You can adjust the rate of the LFO and sync it to tempo as you would expect. Okay, so that's how both the LFOs work. Just make assignments on the modulation matrix and you will be good to go. Now let's look at this envelope section. What you can do with this is set up a motion sequence for the joystick so it moves through various points on its diamond-shaped XY grid on its own. So you don't have to perform this in manually. You can set this up in the envelope section under the mixer tab. Clicking and dragging here will reveal the 4 breakpoints including the initial. These can be positioned anywhere in the diamond space. So imagine the joystick moving to these specific points as the note is played. You need to turn it on to make it work. Now it's moving quite fast, but we can control the rate of movement for each point with the 4 dials here. So now we can get a very nice, long and evolving sound that always has movement. So to summarize the modulation tabs, we have the main mod matrix for modulation assignments. We have the envelope section for filter, amp and mixer envelopes. Now this effects tab has 2 effects processors, just like in the Mini V synth. You can turn them on or off from the top panel, just like you could in the Mini V. I'm not going to go into detail on how these 2 effects work, because you already know this stuff, as you've already seen the effects before. Nothing new here. And lastly, there's this play mode tab, which has some global controls similar to the Prophet 5 mode, which we already looked at. Alright, so that wraps up this VS mode. But there's also the hybrid mode, which combines both modes into one. You can enable that by clicking here. Now we have a new audio tab where we can choose the VCOs for each of the 4 slots here. So as you can see, you have a choice from either of the two synths. Though in C and D, you just have the VS, as the Prophet 5 doesn't have a third or fourth oscillator. And then you can decide where the oscillators go next. You have access to both filters. So here I'm routing the signal to both filters. And both amps are receiving signal. And I can also do a serial routing from the VS filter to the Pro 5 filter. So now we have both synths running at the same time. Pretty neat. Even if you had both the original hardware synths, you would never have been able to do this. Cool. So this is a very powerful and flexible Prophet 5 synth from Arturia.